Morning, everybody. My name is Sean Silver. I'm with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection's Bureau of Air and Waste. Specifically, I work on commercial waste reduction initiatives at MassDEP, and as part of that work, I am one of the stewards of the Massachusetts Recycling Market Development Workgroup, which is what you're here for this morning. If you weren't expecting to be here, then you probably need to be somewhere else. But I'm hopeful that you are in the right place. This morning, we're just this is a lot of enthusiasm. Happy to see the response for this meeting. A lot of folks who are in the virtual meeting room right now. So we're happy to have you here. Happy to share some information. Would definitely love to hear any questions that you might have or feedback that you might have on some of the things that we're going to discuss today. But this meeting is being recorded and will be posted. The meeting recording will be posted to MassDEP's YouTube page and the Recycling Market Development Workgroup website at the conclusion of today's meeting. So, this is our first meeting of 2025. We convened this work group back in 2022. And this is our 9th meeting so far of the Recycling Market Development Work Group. So let me give you a little look at what the agenda will be for today's meeting. My colleagues, Claudine Elian and Joanne Lai, are going to be presenting today as well. I'll tell you some specifics about that. First thing I'll do is we'll just kind of recap, where we've been since 2022 with this work group. And then Claudine is going to speak specifically about the fact that, MassDEP has a solid waste master plan that runs through the period 2020 through 2030. At the midway point, which is now, we, committed to reviewing the various programs that are included in that master plan. And in that is the Recycling Market Development Work Group. We came up with an action plan that we drafted in 2023 and published in 2024. So we haven't had the plan for that long, but in the sense that we are at the halfway point as far as the master plan. And, we have committed to and completed and are working on some short and medium term initiatives on the Recycling Market Development Action Plan. We wanted to give some status updates on that, obviously answer any questions, hear feedback from you. And I should just say, from a technical perspective here, I've muted everybody at the beginning of this meeting. We try to do this, as fairly as possible. If you have a specific question, please raise your hand. You could also just enter it into the chat. We will make every effort to get to all of those. We're leaving periods of time at the conclusion of Claudine's presentation for questions and answers. The same as with my colleague Joanne Lai's presentation on the Waste Reduction Innovation Grant, which we've talked about it for a while. We kind of introduced it at our Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting back in actually the most recent one. I think we talked about it then. So that grant, which Joanne and our team has been working very hard on, will be launching this spring. So Joanne will be presenting on that, and then we'll take a time for Q&A, and then I'll kind of, briefly, we'll kind of bring it back together about some next steps with this work group and with the action plan, and maybe some things to look out for as we forge ahead on recycling market development activities in Massachusetts. Just to give a brief recap at the outset here on this work group, how we got here. This was written into the 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan, a goal to foster in-state market development for reusable, recyclable, and compostable materials. We're always looking to divert those materials, right? But this is with a real sharp lens turned to the markets that are in the state. The target materials for that effort from the outset have been food material, furniture and bulky materials, glass, textiles. We're also looking to increase the ability of recycling facilities to sort materials to get better outcomes as far as get higher value materials coming out of those facilities and going to the market. of the strategies we're looking to employ, as specifically cited in the master plan. We're going to work with stakeholders to develop a market development plan. We have done that. The plan was to support activities across multiple levels of the waste management hierarchy, including reuse, recycling, composting, processing, and other diversion options. And of course, we mentioned some of the materials up above. We have identified several different groups of materials that we're looking to work with, specifically to strengthen those markets, the best candidates for in-state market development. And we also have learned through this process that the regional perspective is important too. There are solutions for some of these materials that cross Massachusetts borders. Obviously, we're not the biggest state out there. A lot of this is done in New England or in the Northeast in general. But we are looking specifically with our efforts to, have some of these businesses in state benefit from our activities. So like I said, this is our 9th meeting overall since 2022. We had 6 that first year. The first 2 meetings were to kind of get our footing. We talked about existing market development programs, both regionally and nationally. To get that perspective, we heard from the Mass Office of Business Development, Mass Development. We heard from the state's Occupational Services Division. They have an environmentally preferable products purchasing program, EPP for short. I realized there was a lot of words there, and I just could have said EPP, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew what I was talking about there. But we heard about that, and we also heard from NERC. We heard from Circular Matters to kind of get and NERC being the Northeast Recycling Council, Circular Matters, getting a more national view on that. Then we had 4 meetings from April through December of 2022 on, kind of specified topics. Each of these meetings had breakout groups. So the first meeting was on business support and economic development strategies. The second kind of flipped that to look at demand side strategies. We had a meeting on education, outreach, networking, information sharing, and then one on research and development. These categories, these kind of ideas of looking at recycling market development kind of structure our plan. And for each of those, we had breakout groups based on materials. We had one breakout group thinking about questions related to these topics. One breakout group was on packaging. One was on organics. One was on bulky materials and textiles, and another was on emerging markets. So with each of these meetings, we're talking about building demand for, packaging materials, building demand for organics, things like that. So we had some very specific questions that we went through. Tried to get feedback from, and again, we got a lot of people in the room today. We had a very bustling, some very bustling meetings with a lot of people joining us, bringing different perspectives from different areas. The research and development meeting in December of 2022 in particular, we had a panel that included voices from an industry association, state recycling market development perspective, higher ed, and a business accelerator perspective. So there was definite value in that. The recordings and presentations of all of these meetings are available on our website. I don't have that linked in there, but if you just use the old Google and typed in Massachusetts Recycling Market Development, I'm pretty sure that would pop right up, and we can send that around. Let's see. In June of 2023, we had drafted the action plan. We had a meeting to introduce that. And last fall, we had another meeting to kind of get back together with this group. Excuse me, I'm just going to pause a second here. Better than clearing my throat every 10 seconds. To, I don't know, not necessarily introduce, but just to kind of talk about other businesses for resources that we had connected with through this process. Obviously we've got this action plan. We're going to get into it with more specificity. But in the course of doing this, doing the action, we're making tons of connections and building a greater understanding ourselves of the landscape that's out there. The recycling, we got a pretty good, idea of what the recycling landscape is, but the innovation landscape and, just a better understanding of markets, you're always going to get that just by talking to people and figure out what's going on the ground level. and also resources that might be beneficial to businesses. So we chose to invite the EPA Small Business Innovation Research Program, or SBIR, back in September of 2024. The Mass Technology Collaborative joined us. They talked about the M2I2 program. We had Mass Hire in the building. We also got a business perspective from 2M Resources, which is a glass processing facility in Massachusetts, and I think they recently announced an acquisition there. But either way, we're making efforts to continue to provide resources, hear from folks, and we hope to continue to do that today. In one sense, with Claudine presenting next, talk about where we've been and hear from you, what you think about what we're doing and what we should be doing. And with respect to the innovation grant, which we're very excited about, of course, but to answer any questions that folks may have on that, because there may be some confusion out there just about what exactly is eligible, or what our aims or goals are, and we want to clear all those things up before we post that grant application this spring. So it's a very exciting time for recycling market development in the state. We hope that enthusiasm only continues to grow. Our partnerships continue to grow. Our conversations continue to enrich us more and more in the efforts that we're doing here. And that's just kind of a little overview of what we're doing and where we've been on recycling market development the past about 3-4 years here. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague Claudine Allian, who's the branch chief for commercial waste reduction at MassDEP. And she will kind of talk about how this all relates to the solid waste master plan and our action plan in particular. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So yes, again, I'm Claudine Ellian, Commercial Waste Reduction Branch Chief, and as Sean noted, so we reached the halfway point of our 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan here in 2025. I'm just going to provide a brief recap of the master plan as it relates to recycling market development. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that. I went back instead of forward.
Oh, no problem.
There we go.
All right. So our 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan was finalized in 2021 and establishes MassDEP's overarching solid waste policy framework. And this plan is supported by multiple action plans, including the Recycling Market Development Action Plan that I will be speaking to shortly. Next slide, please. So in addition to this Recycling Market Development Working Group, we'll also work through the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and we'll report on progress implementing programs and policies and propose adjustments needed to the action plans, considering optimal use of MassDEP staffing and funding. And we hope to complete this by the end of this calendar year, 2025. Next slide, please. So in terms of the overall progress to date, our goal is to reduce disposal by 30%, or by 1.7 million tons by 2030, from 5.7 to 4 million tons. However, total disposal has increased by about 9%, or by approximately 500,000 tons. And this was driven by economic growth, including a 32% increase in state gross domestic product, or GDP. Next slide, please. And so now I'm going to provide an update on the status of the Recycling Market Development Action Plan itself. Next slide. And we published the plan in February of 2024 and continue to grow our recycling business development grants, including the expanded eligibility to reuse projects and the added collection of grants for new wasteland materials. We've also developed guidance for recycling businesses in Massachusetts and plan to launch our Waste Reduction Innovations Grant next month, which my colleague Joanne will be speaking to shortly. Next slide. So now I'm just going to walk through the action item tables within our recycling market development action plan. So in terms of business support and economic development strategies, or kind of supporting the growth of existing reuse and recycling businesses and developing new reuse and recycling businesses, we are firstly continuing to implement the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant, as I mentioned, as well as the Recycling Loan Fund. And secondly, good news, we are ahead of schedule in terms of implementing the Innovation Grant, which was anticipated as a medium term or 3 to 4 year time frame. However, we are planning to launch next month. So hooray for that, and we'll take the applause. We'll wait, I'm kidding. So our MassDEP colleague Joanne will be speaking about this launch in detail shortly. So just a brief note that this will provide funding for investments such as startups, research, and product testing. So in terms of item 3 here, connecting businesses to webinars, workshops, particularly on business planning, grant writing, and financial analysis, we have initiated this in year 1 and are focused on resources offered by Massachusetts and regional agencies. In terms of action item 4 here, providing guidance on how to start a recycling business in Massachusetts, we did complete this in year 1, and this includes information on grants, loans, and permit requirements. And we do plan to update this periodically, as needed. And in terms of item 5 here on business support and economic development and connecting reuse and recycling businesses with financial and technical assistance offered through state and regional economic development organizations, this has also been initiated in year 1. And this also includes funneling businesses to economic development centers and educating centers on why and how they should work with these businesses. And in addition, includes identifying potential tax credits and bond financing. Next slide. One moment. So continuing on with business support and economic development strategies, we are currently implementing item 6, emphasizing program outreach and marketing to minority-owned businesses and businesses near environmental justice populations, and connecting these businesses with assistance resources and partnering with the Supplier Diversity Office. In terms of connecting recycling businesses to mass hire career centers, item 7 of the strategy, is there is a need for skilled equipment maintenance and drivers, and this has been initiated this first year. And we had Mass Hire speak at our last working group in September of last year. Moving on to item 8 and 9 here, recycle smart messaging and connecting with the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan. We are very much engaged with our municipal branch counterpart, who leads those efforts in the solid waste and recycling group. And lastly, in terms of business support and economic development, item 10 for this section, we are continuing to monitor recycling market development programs in other states, such as Washington, Colorado, Michigan, and other Northeast Recycling Committee or NERC states. And we continue to be engaged in conferences, webinars, and participation in regional forums. Next slide. So now moving on to building demand for recycled products. In terms of item 1, we are currently engaging other state sister agencies on purchasing recycled products and are in consistent communication with the Operational Services Division, or OSD, on this effort. Item 2, 3, and 5 here we see as future program commitments. So using the Recycle Smart Massachusetts program as an outreach channel for increasing purchasing of recycled content products, holding workshops to provide guidance to businesses on opportunities to purchase recycled products, and providing funding for pilot projects using recycled materials, with a focus on state agencies, municipalities, and working with OSD and the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, or DCAM. And just stepping back in terms of item 4 here, We are currently engaged with a large number of recycling processors and manufacturers about barriers. And we have been kind of including a deeper dive into the neighboring New York State market outlets. Next slide. So just continuing on with building demand for recycled products, we see much of the engagement with the state legislature, including joint committees as a future program commitment in the long term. So 5 year time frame, so nearing 2030. And we are currently implementing items 2 through 4, connecting with MassDEP's deconstruction work group, including supporting a building reuse infrastructure. So we are also continuing working groups for of course, this recycling market development initiative and exploring regional partnerships as part of this effort. Next slide. All right, so now on to the last strategy, research and development. In terms of item 1 on this table, discussing potential partnerships for collaborative project funding with the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative. We see this as a future program commitment. However, we have initiated discussions with MassTech and M2I2, and they presented at our last working group in September of last year. We've also initiated in year 1, item 2 here, utilizing Massachusetts college and university system to kickstart research and development on material recycling processes, applications, and design for reuse or recyclability. This was actually noted as a future program commitment, but this is something that we've been actively pursuing. And this is, of course, related to the innovation grant, which Joanne will speak to shortly, and as well as how to increase efficiency and economic viability. So item 3 here, working with OSD and other state agencies to pilot and test performance of recycled content products as a future program commitment. See this, within the 3 to 4 year time frame, with a focus on products new to the market. Next slide. I think this is my last slide. So the last bit of my presentation here, item 4 for research and development through the Innovations Grant Program to be launched next month. We are looking to start in year 2 here to test new recycled content products, applications, and technologies. And on a related note, we also hope to support incubator programs starting in year 2 through the Innovation Grants Program, and this would include leveraging other funding and investment opportunities such as foundation funding. And lastly, in terms of research and development, we are currently assessing other MassDEP action plan connections on a regular basis. That's all I've got, but I'm opening it up for Q&A. So back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Claudine. Appreciate that perspective there. I'm just taking a look at the chat here. Kendall has a specific question here. He says, how are you assisting with site identification, including state-owned properties that might be suitable for development? And Kendall, I think I'd just pitch it back to you. What specifically do you mean by development?
And thanks, Sean. For a more of an industrial scale operation, site identification can be really challenging. Mm-hmm. But if there were excess properties owned by the state that were made available, that could be really helpful. So if there's a way that your shop could be sort of helpful in that process.
Yeah, I don't. And Claudine, you could certainly add some perspective on this too, or anybody else from MassDEP who's on the call. I'm not sure how it would work as far as, a state-owned property being used for, some sort of private enterprise, if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, it is. I mean, it's an open question, but again, site identification for industrial sized properties can be a barrier. But often, the states will have excess land or properties available that could be really helpful. So
Yeah, and we have heard suggestions for various different proposed activities over the years that say, hey, kind of look back inward, look toward the state. I see John Fisher of MassDEP is here. He has his hand raised. Maybe John has some thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. For the question, Kendall, I think maybe the best organization to start with a question like that would be Mass Development. They do have some programs focused on economic development of kind of targeted economic development efforts, in particular locations. If you kind of go through their website, you can see kind of the range of services that they offer. And for businesses that are kind of in that mode of trying to find a site, I think that would be a good place to start.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Kendall. I do see some additional questions on this. So this, certainly seems like a topic that, several people are interested in. I see David just popped up in the chat and said, added the very strong NIMBY factor, not in my backyard, in Massachusetts discourages innovative recyclers from siting in the Commonwealth. If DEP helped identify properties suitable for development, including state-owned property, that would be helpful. So yeah, I think, kind of, leading back to what John said about Mass Development's role in this, but, maybe with a specific focus, that might be an approach to look at. And we appreciate, these suggestions. Amy Perlmutter also posted in the chat about this, said that coming is a big issue, particularly in the Boston area. Land for light industrial is being lost to housing. Is there anything the state can do to create a model zoning ordinance or provide incentives related to zoning? That's a good one, and I don't know, really how to answer that, but it's an interesting suggestion. Anybody from the state end have any thoughts or feedback on that idea? If not, that's okay. Obviously, we're just getting feedback at this point. Andrew Brousseau kind of agrees with Amy there, says there's a lot of talk about affordable housing, but not much talk about affordable industrial and commercial space. And we realize that. You see it in a lot of different business sectors that, they get pushed out by raising rents and just the fact that everything right now is really expensive in Massachusetts, just from a real estate perspective, right? This is all good feedback. These are all good comments. And I'll add a follow-up here on a separate topic that said, any consideration RE developing an incubator center? And I would say that the answer to that would be yes. I don't think that, we've considered this with any specificity. We're aware of incubator programs that are kind of out there here and in other states. We're aware of accelerator programs that are functioning right now in other states, specifically for, recycling businesses, recycling efforts. So that's on our radar. I think there's, a Mass DEP plan to try and, implement an accelerator program, potentially similar or maybe different in some ways to some of these other models that are out there. I know from the presentations that we've had to our group, for instance, we've talked with these folks. We've talked to Colorado. We've talked to Washington State. We talked to Washington State a lot. Michigan as well. I know that Arizona has one that's kind of tied in with the university. So, and that's not to exclude anyone specifically, but, it's definitely on our mind. Any thoughts or questions about that from anybody in the room here? Okay. And I keep seeing the questions pile up, so this is great. We've got plenty of time for this, so this is great. Keep them coming. Amy says, how are you letting other businesses and other audiences know about grant and support opportunities? Are you reaching out to manufacturers in the state using the NAICS codes to target potential customers? We're doing outreach through a lot of different channels right now. I don't know if we've gone as deep as the NAICS codes here, but between industry associations, incubators and accelerators that are out there, and have companies under their wings, through the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and all the different working groups that we have. Those are just some that pop into mind. I know that Joanne is compiling a lot of the, the kind of the outreach list for this. So I don't know if Joanne or Claudine has anything specifically to add, about the, how we're getting the word out there about the grant.
I could speak a little bit on it. So regarding to grant opportunities and just getting the word out, I think a lot of it is, knowing the different industries, different materials, and then also just reaching out either through email or, through phone calls. A lot of times we are plugged in through email listings. And so again, what Sean said, a lot of times we have those one-on-one connections and then also branch out and, have those connections send out to their, listings, connections. So really creating this network. So yeah, utilizing a lot of MassDEP Workgroup listings as well as external and personal outreach.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate that. If there's any other suggestions related to outreach or questions about that, again, happy to take any and all feedback here. Continuing to scroll through the chat. And again, if you want to speak directly, you can raise your hand as well. Let's see. Yuli has a comment and question here. There's work on innovation clustering geography. We can cross-check the data with state data on waste volumes to identify optimal geography. Yuli, if you wouldn't mind maybe just expanding on that a little bit for clarity, so everybody can kind of have an understanding of how that might work.
Yeah, so hello everyone, Yuli here from MIT and Football
Yeah.
Collective. I think in the work of identify optimal landing, we did a lot of work in identifying clustering of where the startups and the incubation of companies is happening with agnostic categories of industry. So that work has been done. There's some maps out there that you can have. But then if you cross-check also with your data on waste volumes and type of waste that is happening across the Commonwealth, you could really start identifying where do we need those places and where also is land from the state that could be utilized. So it will be more way. So then you have a optimal mapping of where should these new places exist for Massachusetts. So that was my thinking there.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Thank you, Yuli.
Anyone wants to work on that or think about that, happy to support that idea.
Great. Thanks. Just getting getting through the chat. Andrew makes the point of 40B housing projects, which increases the pressure on existing industrial, commercial, municipal land.
Yeah, I think that's something that keeps coming up is the need for land to handle our waste, right? It feels like the state, the population is too big and doesn't have, didn't save the space for managing its waste. So you could make an argument that we don't need to increase our population, right? Because we can't even, handle the waste that we have. I think 40B projects typically, they go around local zoning, which maybe a local area has said, hey, this is where we want our commercial industrial space. But now 40B housing can come in and drop like 300 residents there, right? So the state's actively has a program that's making it harder to find spaces, not just for waste, but for industrial, commercial, etc. Like one example up on the North Shore, like there's one place for residents to drop off trash. That's G Mello in Georgetown. As more, as places shut down in our area, like the Gloucester one was shut down for a long time, like that puts more pressure on Georgetown. And then with that increased pressure on Georgetown, now, neighbors there have NIMBY issues. And then there's pressure to shut that one down. So it's like a domino effect. So I see that as an issue. I just wonder if the state has enough population and like maybe we shouldn't let Boston kind of drive for more jobs, which is just putting pressure on everyone else.
Yeah, and we realize, just look at any kind of statewide map that we produce, that identifies outlets for various materials. The outlets inside of 495 are, definitely inside of 128, but certainly inside of 495 are limited, right? And that's where you have a major population. Not to exclude everybody else, but Eastern Mass is heavy in population. John has his hand up again. I don't know if John had anything to add to that or any of the previous questions. And again, we're writing all these down, taking stock of this conversation here.
Well, yeah, I also just saw that Andrew Ellsworth has his hand up, and I wanted to address his comment here about reuse and reclaimed building materials, and maybe we can turn to Andrew next and see if there's anything else there. But yes, absolutely. MassDEP has a reduce and reuse action plan and a reduce and reuse working group. And as part of that, we have a specific work group on building deconstruction. So we're very focused on that. We're focused on it as part of our recycling market development action plan as well, and as part of our construction and demolition materials action plan. We have, in addition to what we've talked about here today, we have our reduce and reuse micro grants that, building materials are an important material there, and we've prioritized recycling and reuse of building materials both in our recycling business development grant program, and we'll be talking more about our waste reduction innovations grant in a few minutes. So that's absolutely a priority for us.
Yeah, and there's a big meeting coming up. Well, I don't know if it's bigger than any other meetings, but I know the deconstruction work group is going to kind of be ramping up some of his activities in the near future. Andrew, was there anything to add to that?
No, that's it. I wanted to just square this with all those other things happening and making like I didn't hear any direct notes about building materials, and it's heavy on recycled content materials. So just making sure it's in there and that it's part of the conversation and not in a separate bucket or silo.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the feedback.
No, thanks.
Again, I'm kind of trying to dig these out of the chat here. I see Alexandra from the Mass Office of Business Development had a comment as well, or a question as well. Have you engaged with Mass CEC or the Business Front Door team? Was anything else that you want to add to that? I see you do have your hand up.
Yeah, so this is kind of stepping back to the conversation about outreach, but I know the Mass Leads Act pretty significantly widened the definition of climate tech.
Mhm.
So I think if you haven't engaged with Mass DEC for outreach, I think that's definitely something you should do.
Mhm.
And then as far as the business front door, I was kind of scrolling the screen, so I don't know if anyone else on here is involved with that. But that's new, that's coming out of EOED. We're in soft launch right now, but it's a portal for any business to come in and register and see a list of resources that's available from the state. And I don't believe that anything about this working group and your grants is on there. So we should connect later, or I can connect you directly with the front door team and figure out how we want to do. I'll kind of spare everyone the back end Salesforce details, but there are a couple different avenues for that. And I think we definitely need to be in. I know I've spoken to some companies and told them about some little grant programs, but I know it's not in that unified system yet.
Yeah, and this is, why organizations like MOBD are so valued,
Yeah.
but by us, just because of the connections that you guys have.
And I think somebody mentioned newsletters, so also like the chamber newsletters
Yep.
are a good one.
Yep, that's part of it. And, I will say yes to CEC. But yeah, the business front door is definitely something that's kind of topical here. I see John and Claudine also have their hands up, maybe with respect to this question.
Yes, and I don't know, Claudine might be something similar is what I'm about to say, but yeah, Alex, we did have a meeting with some folks from Mass Office of Business Development when we were developing our resources for recycling businesses, and that was before the front door portal had been launched.
Yeah.
So we should probably just update that to include that link, but also circle back and make sure that we share our information with your team so that we can kind of be sharing our resources in both directions. So I think we can have another follow-up discussion about that.
Yeah.
And just getting back to Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, we were very much engaged with them on our solar panel recycling review of existing markets and practices. That was a part of a breakout session that I led on emerging markets. And so we're very much plugged into looking at the renewable energy infrastructure and end of useful life of those systems, including robotics, AI, and kind of how it all kind of falls into the e-scrap sector and the complexities of that. So again, yeah, very much engaged with Mass Clean Energy Center on that effort, as well as Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources.
And we get the kind of climate tech, part of this. I mean, waste is greenhouse gas emissions, right?
Yeah.
So this is all interconnected. Forgive me as I continue to kind of scroll here. Oh, here's a big question: Will the state allow gasification like what CTEC is doing in Farmington, Connecticut? With a follow-up there that is John's already on this. Okay. So yeah, John had a specific reply saying the best approach for a specific project is to request a pre-permitting meeting with the applicable MassDEP regional office, in this case, the Southeast office. Tamara has a question about what are the eligibility criteria and what's the percent of grant funding out of the total project budget. We will get to that in Joanne's presentation coming up next. Although, wait, is that about the reuse business development grants, or is it about the innovation grants? I'm trying to figure out what that is about.
The one that you just revealed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we will be getting into that with more detail coming up. But I see Sohaib was on that question as well. Kind of mentioned that we have websites for all of our grant programs that do explicitly say what the eligibility is. Amy mentioned highly recommend working with accelerators and incubators. She mentioned Clean Tech Open, Mass Challenge, Greentown Labs. Perhaps sponsor an award, provide grants for office space or an intern for startup, pay the entry fee for an accelerator, etc. All great ideas. We have been having conversations with these organizations, and again, Amy, kind of appreciate your role and your suggestions throughout this process as we've been engaging here for a while now. But yeah, it's I would say, I guess I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. MassDEP historically hasn't had a ton of conversations with these organizations, right? Because we really haven't had to. But here's something where we see a real ability to drive diversion, hopefully in the short and longer term. I guess it depends on what your definition of short is, but getting some of these projects to scale, hopefully, and getting them to make an impact, on our waste reduction goals for the state. We mentioned the 2030 goal earlier in today's meeting. So, these conversations are really vital to getting there, right? Because, we've been making some progress in a lot of areas, but there's obviously other initiatives that we need to help drive here. Are there resources for municipalities or school districts to receive funding for waste reduction and reuse? Kathy Mirza from MassDEP, our municipal waste reduction branch chief, said, passed along the link to the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program. A follow-up with, can any of the grants be used for development of zero waste plans to set strategy? And Kathy pointed Margie there to the specific waste reduction section of the grant where a municipality can write their own grant proposal. And then Amy had some other organizational suggestions. Did everybody's question or comment? Did I manage to highlight it there? I realized that was a bit cumbersome. I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure that everything that came up got spoken to. If anybody who's on the call wanted to jump in, now is certainly the time to do that. And obviously, we're happy to continue conversations offline too. Andrew has his hand up. Andrew.
Hey, I got one other, a little more positive.
Yeah.
U.S. Compost Council is working on market development for finished compost, both used by municipalities and, other sectors, not just like agriculture. I'm just wondering who's the best, to connect to at MassDEP, to connect that USCC effort with someone at MassDEP, because USCC is coming out with model legislation and model ordinances, etc.
So as far as legislation, I mean, we wouldn't be doing that. We'd only be, if something went through, we'd be promulgating regs based on that.
Right. I more meant who at MassDEP could take recommendations from the USCC and kind of push them to the different places within the state.
Do you mean do you mean like the legislature?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. Yeah.
Andrew, that probably depends. And probably the first question is, we agree with the recommendation, and do we think it's appropriate? But probably the way to handle those is through me and through discussion with the organic subcommittee, and then we can discuss from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate, obviously your perspective and passion too about organics and composting in particular. Jonathan has his hand up.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you very
Jonathan,
much.
yeah, I saw your question in there. I'm sorry if I didn't get to you.
That's all right. So for the audience, I'm wondering if decommissioned power poles are deemed to be C and D. Some of the opportunities laid out are pretty specific, and this is sort of an oddball. It's obviously not wrecking down a building, but it is part of an installation nonetheless, and it has a known toxicity. So I'm wondering how Mass DEP would view those materials to see if it is eligible in the grants that we're talking about.
Yeah, John, do you have a response on that? Just about if it's C and D or if the hazardous nature of it, I guess, changes things.
Yeah. So yeah, Jonathan, I think generally we probably consider that within the realm of C and D. It's certainly not municipal solid waste, so it doesn't fit there. So I think generally we'd consider that as kind of a maybe kind of like a subcategory of C and D. So I think probably, I grant specific questions we always need to look at specific to each grant program, but I think generally speaking, we would consider that a portion of C and D.
Thank you.
Thanks again for that. Anybody else that we failed to get to or any follow-ups on any of the topics that were raised there? Obviously we're taking some time to get through all these questions, but this is the time that we've set aside to do it. So, okay. I do see a new message popping up in chat. With the lowered threshold to a half-ton commercial organic food waste, how will compliance be handled? That is just to kind of, just give a quick answer to that. I mean, that's part of, we have MassDEP has waste ban inspectors who are going out to transfer stations, landfills, disposal facilities throughout the state, your municipal waste combustion facilities, and looking at loads that are coming in. They're seeing, commercially generated loads. They're seeing food waste. So just as it was when the threshold was 1 ton, they're making an assessment of a load, trying to figure out, how much food is in the load. They're figuring out where that load came from. And then they're, going through our usual compliance and enforcement process, which, begins with a notice of noncompliance and, can escalate from there. Yes,
just to put a quick plug in there, we're going to be having our next organic subcommittee meeting on April 10th. So talking a lot about issues along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our Recycling Works program has worked, specifically with folks who, have received, have received notices from MassDEP. Hey, you've got food, in your trash. And, even folks that haven't. Recycling Works in Massachusetts for years now has kind of existed as our statewide business support function, contracted through the Center for Ecotechnology. And they work a lot with businesses that are generating food waste, either, from maybe they're producing something or maybe they're, a restaurant or whatever. They've been on it. We're always happy to talk to folks who are having issues with food waste in whatever quantity about that. Travis asked if there was a link to sign up for that organic subcommittee meeting, and John popped that right into the chat if you want to jump into that. And there's a gap in granting towns our grant writers. Any recommendations on who can help facilitate grant applications? Mark Granato replied kindly there, said he worked at the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. To reach out to your regional planning agency and see what's available there. I also have, I know we have local planning assistant hours that our towns can get on an annual basis to use for any kind of grant work, among other options. So that sounds like a fantastic resource there. Any other grant writing tools that are out there that folks might highlight? And I see John has his hand up.
Yeah, it's not grant writing exactly, but for any municipality or regional group that's looking at applying to a grant through our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, you can definitely work with your municipal assistance coordinator to get guidance and assistance about that.
Great, thank you, John. And I also see that just for Kathy Mirza's attention there's a Margie Bell made a comment about one of the links for the grants that's not working. So maybe Kathy can look into that. I don't know if there's anything else at this point. It is 11 o'clock, so we're kind of halfway through the 2-hour block here, and I do want to transition to Joanne Lai's presentation about the Waste Reduction Innovation Grant, where hopefully we'll answer some more questions there. And again, we're we're saving time for questions here. If you have questions after Joanne's presentation, we can always talk about the ones that are tied to the grant or anything else. We're trying to leave plenty of time to have a back and forth here. And if there's anything that we're not able to answer today, we'll certainly get back to folks. Like I said, I'm writing all these down. We're saving this chat. We're recording the meeting. So all of this stuff we'll make sure that we get to in one way or another. So with that, thank you. This is great. This is the purpose of meetings like this. So I would like to turn it over at this point to Joanne Lai, who works in our commercial waste reduction. Pardon me. Commercial waste reduction branch here at MassDEP, and has played a key role in helping develop this waste reduction innovation grant. So Joanne, take it away.
Thanks, Sean. So I'm Joanne Lai. I'm an environmental analyst with MassDEP. And we can go to the next slide to introduce the Waste Reduction Innovation Grant. So this is a completely new program that was first proposed in our 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan. We wanted to have a recycling market development action plan in place before launching this grant, so that just to help us guide our market development programs and strategies. So here I've listed some of the goals for this new grant program. Basically, this Waste Reduction Innovation Grant, we're hoping to expand or open new supply chains that extend the use of materials. We hope that it will increase reuse and recycling capacity for new and difficult to manage waste materials and increase the quality, performance, value of recovered materials. With that said, we anticipate awarding up to $6 million in total, and this is really based off of what type of applications we receive. Sean, if you could go to the next slide. So provided here is a description of eligible entities. Any for-profit, nonprofit companies, corporations that are registered in the Commonwealth at the time of contracting, they are eligible as long as they also meet the criteria listed below. And that's if the grant is funding any equipment, they must be used exclusively in Massachusetts and must remain in the state and used for its funded purpose. There must be compliance with federal and state environmental laws for the past 3 years, and then projects must be completed within the required timeline from the contract signing. You could go to the next slide. The innovation grant is split into 2 tracks, or categories is what we're calling it. Category 1 is our startup and pilot project category. They are smaller grants that are funding the commercialization of projects that have demonstrated success outside of bench scale lab environments. And then we also have our second category. Category 2 is our innovative capital investment, which really hopes to support capital infrastructure. So focusing in on new technology or equipment that's not prevalent in Massachusetts. And applicants may apply for only one grant category. We could go to the next slide. So this is a summary of category 1. On the slide, I provided some key information about the pilot project category. An applicant could be awarded from $50,000 to $100,000 with a minimum financial match of 25% of the applicant's requested amount. So for example, the minimum applicant match amount for a 100,000 grant request would be 25,000. For eligible materials, we're excited to announce that it is any material that is diverted from solid waste disposal, as long as it falls under one of the required activities. And those required activities is either processing, manufacturing, reusing of proposed materials, or it's an application of a technology that supports these activities. You'll also see here that the grant-funded cost in this category covers equipment and other capital cost. Keeping in mind of our goal to support the commercializations of startups and pilot projects, we also included staff or consultant time, feasibility study, marketing cost. So those are eligible grant-funded costs. I also provided a list here for activities and expenses that are not eligible. And with all that said, the applicant must be able to complete the project within an 18-month time frame. I think we go to the next slide. So here for category 2, it looks a lot different. Both the award amount and the minimum match is larger in this category. So the award amount ranges from $500,000 to $2 million with a minimum 50% match by the applicant. So again, an example here is the minimum applicant match amount for a $2 million grant request would be $1 million. This category also has a targeted list of eligible materials. So applicants must address one of these materials. We have textiles, container glass, C&D materials, bulky items, and household lithium batteries. And we're looking for processing, manufacturing, or reuse activities here. The grant-funded costs are limited to equipment or other capital costs, and also provided is a list of what activities and expenses are not eligible for this category. And then again, the applicant must be able to complete the project within a 36-month time frame. Okay, we could go to the next slide. So those that are interested in applying, we are accepting online applications only, and we anticipate that the applications will become available in mid-April, so it's coming up. The website is shared here, and that's where we'll have the link posted for those that are interested. In the time being, I suggest the first thing you got to do is read our grant guidelines in its entirety, not only to review the eligibility criteria, but there are also crucial and important details regarding the grant process. And then afterwards, you may start preparing your information you need to submit. So again, the grant guideline is useful in helping you prepare because it has our evaluation metrics, which is written in there. Once applications open up, you've applied through the online form, please also submit your proforma to my email. And the proforma is just one of the documents that we also review as part of the evaluation. If we go to the next slide. I just want to quickly point out that this is our website. When you go on it, this is what you'll see. I want to point out that the top of the page, you'll be able to click and read the grant guidelines there. And then also when we have the applications available, you will be able to go to how to apply and complete the form. We will have the links right there. Okay, go next. Wanted to also provide you a proforma template that you can use. It's found in our grant guidelines for applicants, and we provided this so that those that are applying understand what information we're specifically looking for. Applicants can recreate this table and fill it in, save it as a PDF, and email it to me once the application has been completed and submitted. If we go to next. Listed here are the evaluation criteria. Our grant guidelines tell you exactly what we are looking for when we review applications. This is one way you could prepare your application before the April 15th date. So preparing responses related to these criterias that's listed on the right of the slide. So for example, we have project description and operations. We ask, what's the goal and scope of the project? What's the proposed activity? Or for timeline, what are each steps of the grant funded activities and when would deliverables be completed? So these are examples of just like snippets of what we're looking for in the applications. And, a strong application we want to emphasize is that all evaluation criteria are addressed. Okay, if we go to next. So just wanted to provide here an estimated timeline for the grant program. Again, we're anticipating an April 15th launch date. That's when we will hopefully have the applications open and available for interested applicants to apply. What happens when applications open up is that our formal question period also begins. So from April 15th to June 2nd, questions that I receive is compiled together and answers to those questions will be posted to our website. I think the first 3 dates are important to look out for at this time. The application deadline is in July. The review process will also take some time, but just want to share the process so that we're aware of the timeline that MassDEP is hoping to achieve. If we go to the next slide. I only have just a few slides left, but wanted to share the payment schedule for those that go through the grant process and is notified that they're awarded. So once an applicant submits their application, they are then awarded for their project proposal. The project is awarded as contracts. So similar to other MassDEP grants like RBDG, the Recycling Business Development Grant. Payments are different for the 2 categories. Category 1, we have 90% of the grant paid on a reimbursement basis and then a final payment. And then for category 2, the grant funding is distributed in 3 stages, where there will be an initial reimbursement payment, then an additional payment distributed over a quarterly basis, and then the final payment after deliverables have been submitted and accepted by MassDEP. Go to the next slide. So this may not be something to concern over now, but awarded applicants are required to sign and submit the following forms to complete the agreement process. We encourage you to review these forms, if not prior to submitting an application, then after you submit an application. This is really, here just for you to familiarize what documents we expect for those that are awarded. Okay, we could go to next. So this is my last slide. It's on the Waste Reduction Innovation Grant. I think, we can open up to questions now. And then if you have questions later on or after the meeting, you may also email me with the email address provided here.
Great, Joanne. Thank you. Appreciate you running us through that there. I am seeing some new messages in the chat. I'm going to start with those. And again, if folks just want to talk, and raise their hand, you can do that as well. EC has a question specifically, and you might have already run over this, but would you consider plastic from electronic waste part of residential plastics on the innovation grant? Plastic from electronic waste. So like we're talking about separating plastic for some sort of process to separate plastic from e-waste. Is that it? And maybe TC could add just a little more context to that.
So I'm kind of talking about electronic waste with high concentrations of plastic, like vacuum cleaners, printers, Keurigs, that sort of thing.
I think
Thanks.
for category one, because category one, any materials is eligible, I would say, that's more likely. I think for category two, we're looking for bulky plastics. So I think, we would have to consider what the project activity is, or, what the material source is.
So just like for just that we've gotten calls for like pallets and pallets of Keurigs, basically like trailers, same as other types of like vacuum cleaners and stuff, and in order for them to be processed and recycled properly, especially when it comes to plastics, we have to ship them out of state. Like there's no like in-state solutions that I know of.
I mean, that would, kind of be the definition of developing a market in state, right? So,
To weigh in on the residential plastic in particular, generally when we talk about residential plastics in the category of bulky, we're talking about things like buckets, outdoor children's toys, plastic yard furniture, things like that is kind of, I think, what we had in mind there when we talk about residential plastics and coming from residents.
yeah, that was kind of a specific material that we, talked about throughout the course of the work group meetings. Some of those bulky items being a volume wise, tonnage wise, having a significant stake in our waste characterization assessments. That there's just a lot of that stuff in the waste. But again, like Joanne said, that seems like it could be, and obviously we could talk about specific project proposal, eligibility questions offline as well. Just looking at another chat that came in. One of the criteria for the new grant program is compliance with state, federal environmental laws over the past 3 years. So if an applicant has a minor, well, I wouldn't, I guess, characterize the grade here, but it has a notice of noncompliance over the past 3 years, should they not apply? Might be better for past environmental compliance to be a factor that DEP considers when evaluating applications. John answered that in the chat. He said it won't be that stringent. We've modified it to say the applicant must have no active, unresolved, higher level enforcement actions against them. Jonathan has a question. In category 2 projects, do applicants propose a per ton quarterly award level, or does MassDEP determine this financial element? Okay, so the question is whether it's coming from MassDEP or from the applicants.
I think I can address that, Sean. So so there's 2 stages to this. It's coming from the applicant in the sense that it's based on the application that's submitted. So in the application, the applicant's going to propose a project budget, for certain expenses, and then as part of the application, they're going to be specifying, here's the amount of additional tonnage we think we would capture or divert based on this project. We then would, assuming that project gets awarded, we would basically, the way this will work is we would define applicants who we consider grant finalists, subject to reaching agreement on a contract and grant agreement with MassDEP. And that grant agreement, we would then lay out the schedule for project payments, which would include how much would be paid in the initial payment, and then how much would be paid over this 1 year plus period for what we call a performance-based payment, which is basically based on the amount of tonnage diverted during that period. The idea here is a couple things. One, when we're giving public dollars to private entities, we always want to be focused on trying to ensure, performance and public benefit as best we can. So when we tie a portion of the payment to actual diversion of materials, that helps ensure that to some degree. And then, just spreading out that payment a little bit over time reduces the grant risk a little bit from our perspective. So if we have a project that we grant that does not succeed for some reason, does not achieve the tonnage goals, we wouldn't necessarily be paying out the full grant funds for that project. So a company would only get the full grant funds if they achieve the tonnage goal that they set in their application.
Any other, and thank you, John. Any other questions specific to the Waste Reduction Innovation Grant? Obviously, we have some time set aside here where we can all be in the same room, and it might just be easier to throw some of these out here right now rather than trying to have an offline conversation over email. But again, we're happy to have those as well. Group has a question. He said, "Congrats on the big milestone." Thank you. If the objective is to reduce waste in our Commonwealth by 1.7 million tons by 2030, why not include organics as an eligible material for Category 2 investments in technology that are not prevalent in the Commonwealth? John, do you want to take it? Not to put you on the hot seat, but do you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. So I think, with organics, I guess I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is we have pretty significant infrastructure in place already to a degree, not all the infrastructure we eventually want, but a significant portion. And we also have at least 3 different programs that support additional investment in the food waste infrastructure right now, including our recycling and reuse business development grants, our recycling loan fund, and our sustainable material recovery program grants for cities and towns. Also, potentially our reduce and reuse micro grants, particular to food donation and food rescue. And the food waste has been a priority for those grant programs for a number of years. So we feel like we've already invested a lot in the infrastructure for food waste. We have mechanisms to continue to invest in the infrastructure for food waste through other grant programs. And we felt that there was really a need and an opportunity for innovation, particularly in these other areas. Food material remains a priority from an infrastructure and market development standpoint, but we just felt like the innovations grant, we were really focused on trying to get more infrastructure in place for these particular materials. So that was some of the thinking behind that. Just feeling like, I guess one, the infrastructure's already been developed to some degree. 2, there are other programs that we can continue to use to invest in infrastructure, and then 3, we just felt a really pressing need for some of these other material categories to move that infrastructure forward. So that's the way I think about that.
Thanks, John. Well said. I don't have anything to add to that, certainly. Any other questions? Again, now's the chance. If you want to put in the chat or raise your hand, now's the chance. If we're at the point of wrapping up, then I can head to the next slide and we can talk about some of the things that'll be coming forward with this group. But again, and I don't want to sound repetitive. We appreciate the fact that you folks are here. We appreciate the perspectives that you bring to the table. That's really been, a hallmark of this group since we kicked it off in early 2022. We've learned a lot from your feedback and continue to learn a lot. And we hope that it's a mutually beneficial exchange here, where you're getting something out of your participation in this group, and we're equally getting something out of it as well. I see Melissa has her hand up. Melissa, would you like to speak? Let me see. I'll there's a button here where I can ask you to unmute, so maybe it'll pop up a thing here. There you go.
Okay. So I do appreciate that there's a lot of push for food waste, for the diversion of it, but not for the processing of it. We do need innovative ways on how are we going to take all the food waste, especially with the expectation that more food waste is going to be coming into the community. Where is it supposed to go? We don't have places. I'm in rural. I can't even imagine what it's like in the city. So I would really disagree that we've got infrastructure for that.
So you're talking about like hyper local solutions here? I mean, because there's capacity for processing food waste.
Oh, where? When I go to Recycling Works, there are only a handful of places that will take it, and they're maxing out. So I'm not sure, other than taking it out of state, where am I supposed to go?
Are you talking about this from a commercial or a residential perspective?
Both.
Okay. Well, I mean, commercial programs exist, throughout the cities and towns.
To take the food waste.
Excuse me, residential programs exist.
Where is it supposed to go?
To an AD facility, to a compost site.
Right, but there are
farm, to go to animal feed. I mean, we have a. I don't know if you've seen the same map. We have a map of sites.
I'm in a business, so I'm telling you, I'm running up against that there isn't places to put it. I can't increase my business. I can't take on more customers because I don't have a place to put it.
So you're collecting. You're in a rural environment, and you're saying that there aren't sites that are within a reasonable distance for you to haul this material.
Yeah, the closest I've got now, because we're maxing out here, is Burlington, Vermont.
Where are you located?
I'm in Berkshire County.
Okay.
Yeah. So Melissa, I appreciate the comment. I would just circle back to what I already said, is that we have multiple programs that already will provide grants to facilities that want to develop, whether it's composting, anaerobic digestion, animal feed, that those programs do offer funding for development of more infrastructure. I would agree with you that going forward, we do need more sites and more distributed sites.
Thanks, Melissa, for the feedback there. For sure, we can certainly understand why, it's difficult to move recycled or compostable materials great distances, and it certainly helps to have locations be close and centralized for businesses to be able to continue their activities. We have a suggestion for decentralized AD in the greater Boston area. We do have some echoing of sentiments for food for category too. So, again, we appreciate that perspective. I think, John kind of added our 2 cents on, the money is out there. There is, capacity. It's, and hey, Rashi has a front row seat for this. Would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I think, thank you. Thank you very much for organizing these calls, because they're very helpful for all of us. I think there is definitely potential to add more anaerobic digesters. We've demonstrated that food waste on dairy farms really does work very well. I guess the couple of things that I was going to bring up is, just because it felt like there were already quite a few digesters, it may be good to understand where there might be true gaps in the state. distance-wise, if there is anything DEP could do to help us understand where the true gaps are, that would be very helpful for people who are planning new projects, new AD projects. So certainly something I could use and also think through. I also wanted to bring up another piece that we are feeling like we continue to address, and that is the rendering meats. It feels like they're getting dumped with the rest of the food waste. And I know that we have rules and regulations where we cannot bring meats into our facilities because they bring pathogens that may not be really good for us. How do we address that question of how do we create separate, make people follow guidelines that are required to not bring them into a dairy digester? What would be those places where they could go? That is one piece that is front and center for us as we are operating these facilities. But if you all do a mapping exercise of where the gaps are, that would be really, really helpful also. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Yuli brought up earlier in this call, about kind of where are the sources, where how does it look on the map, what are our needs? That could be very beneficial. Just a question about where the meat, I guess specifically like where the meat is coming from. What kind of customer is bringing this in? Is it mixed with to some degree? I guess I assume with other food waste. What's like what kind of route is this stuff coming from?
Yeah, and I think it's been early on, like the rules were pretty clear, and I think they're just getting a little fuzzy. We know the rules are if it's an edible meat, for animals or humans, then it can go into anaerobic digesters, which are mesophilic at 100 degrees F. But it's the other stuff that's getting mixed into that goes to the DPACs specifically. And it feels like there might be a gap there for where these renderers can go, and it's getting mixed up with the food waste. And we're suddenly getting more and more and more of this so-called meat that we shouldn't be getting with bones and everything.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. I don't know if you all have already thought about this, but it's definitely coming to us, and we are having to deal with it. So I just wanted to bring that up as maybe there needs to be a plan for that rendering meat that shouldn't really be coming to us.
And John, have you heard about this through the organics subcommittee, or has any thought been made about this so far?
I mean, in general, I'm aware of the dynamic that certain types of facilities may limit what types of food material they accept, and when that happens, that leaves the question of what to do with the rest of it. I haven't heard that specifically, but I'll repeat my plug for the April 10th Organics Subcommittee meeting, because we're talking a lot about organics management infrastructure here, and that's definitely going to be a topic of focus in that organics subcommittee meeting. So one of the questions that we're being asked, or one of the requests that's being made of us, is to consider, establishing a universal food waste disposal ban with no threshold for the food waste ban. And one of the big questions that has to be answered before that's done is ensuring that there's adequate infrastructure in place to manage more materials. So the organics infrastructure question is a really, really important one in the context of where we go with our food waste diversion going forward. So I appreciate a lot of the comments and thoughts here today, and encourage people. I got it, and I heard it today, but we're going to be talking more at that organic subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, and we get that, regionally where you are in the state might determine, your opinion about how well this is working, right? There are different needs just based on geography. That applies to a lot of recyclable materials, but specifically with organics, and given the amount to which we've really ramped up around, our focus on organics in the past decade plus, we understand that's timely and important. Andrew, you have your hand raised.
Hey, I just wanted to make a follow-up comment. I heard Rashi say that we need more anaerobic digesters, but I would argue that we need more compost sites, because a lot of the organics out there and that would get captured by, furthering the food waste ban threshold are, getting to the municipal and residential level. And I want to make the point that you can get more total diversion from the trash by sending municipal residential organics to a compost site, because not only can you take compostable packaging, which is a solution for single-use packaging, but you also don't have the reject part of that the depackagers create, right? And a lot of the residential material is a lot of like bones, rinds, stuff that's been eaten down. So I believe you get a higher reject rate with that municipal stream. So I think that if the state's after diversion, considering more compost infrastructure for municipal residential food waste is a strong strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And again, there's some specific, like you're mentioning specific items here. There's probably specifically tailored solutions, for just different applications. And I'll bring up, I still don't know. I keep forgetting whenever I say, is it a GIF or is it a GIF? But, like on the internet where you have the little pictures of people that move, right? There's one of a little girl just saying, why not both? And, I think the answer here may be that there's an opportunity for solutions of different shapes and sizes. And that
I was
could
gonna pitch in and say, I agree with Andrew 100%. Even scientifically, like, anaerobic digesters, if you put too much protein, we get nitrogen inhibition. So I think there is definitely a place where we could talk about how could digesters and composting operations work hand in hand. I really do agree with Andrew that there is probably a happy just a relationship that can be nurtured between the two. That would help the entire state.
April 10th. Get your tickets. Guess what? The tickets are free. But yeah, and again, appreciate the fact that these sorts of conversations come out of this work group, and we would love to nurture any potential relationships that can result from that. John?
I just at the risk of beating to death the April 10th meeting, I was just going to say something else about that, which is that yes, we have a meeting scheduled on April 10th, but I'm pretty certain the topics and issues that we need to discuss are going to take more than one meeting. So I expect that's going to be one of several meetings over the course of the coming year. There are a lot of issues and questions to talk about in the space of food waste. We're at a bit of a pivot point with our program work, as Andrew mentioned, shifting more into food waste from residents and small businesses, and that infrastructure need is a little bit different. And we definitely, it's going to take a lot of discussion to piece this all together. So, we're going to be talking on April 10th, but we expect there's going to be some ongoing dialogue and maybe some more work on our part around these issues. For example, I think it was Rashi who made the suggestion about kind of mapping capacity needs and things along those lines. So we're interested in what we can do, whether it's grants and loans, whether it's technical assistance, whether it's information and outreach. We're going to be trying to piece that all together into an updated organics action plan that can help us move forward. So anyway, I just wanted to put that plug out there, both for April 10th, but also just want to make sure people know that, we're not expecting to figure all this out in one meeting. We expect it's going to be an ongoing conversation.
Thank you, John. And yes, the residential focus, I think we see that, becoming clear. What we're doing at the city and town level and where that stuff gets taken is important. So, thanks to Andrew, thanks to Rashi, thanks to, everyone for putting that into words here. Just taking a look at the chat, I don't see anything else new. I would say last call here for these discussions, and I'll just get into next steps after this. Count to 5, Mississippi. All right, let's talk about next steps. Whoops. Oh, of course. Went too far. There we go. So, as far as next steps for this group, for our action plan, some of the more notable things that I just wanted to mention, I guess, before we conclude here. For one, this isn't necessarily a next step for us and by itself, but if you're interested, the Occupational Service Division, OSD, just put out their environmental purchasing annual report. I think I got this email on Tuesday, so I haven't even really looked at it myself. But again, if you're looking to figure out, what's going on at the buying level, at the state agency level for environmentally preferable procurement, that's your window to that. We've had Julia Wolf on these calls from the EPP program. She's presented, and we realize that is an element of our approach here is making sure that recycled products get purchased, right? So that actually there's, I think, several different program elements in our action plan that deal with that. So I would suggest giving that a look. I can pass along the information of that in the follow-up email for this meeting. Again, we will post the recording. We'll post this presentation. I can post a link to that. There's probably a few things from the chat that we need to follow up on too. So we'll just include it all in one big email to update this group. The second thing, and Joanne hit on this, we got the innovation launch, grant launch coming up. So that's going to be, not only getting the information out there to folks who need to know, but then, taking the questions and then reviewing all those grant proposals. So that's going to be big for us this year. This is an always sort of thing for us. We're going to continue to build connections. Just think of all the different organizations that were mentioned on today's call. And yes, we have connected with a lot of them, but there's probably a couple more who we haven't talked to yet. We are meeting organizations that support businesses. We are meeting, businesses themselves. We are gaining a better understanding of what's going on in the innovation landscape in the state and just in general with recycling markets all the time. And we kind of hope to bring some of that back to this group through resources. So, hopefully the connections that we're building can become connections for you folks going forward. So that's just an always thing in terms of our plan. That's never an action item that's done. So we will be, obviously working on that, having more phone calls, conversations, and, hopefully having some tangible effects from those. We mentioned earlier, exploring the potential for an accelerator program. The timeline for that, might be more of kind of like a medium term thing here in terms of the action plan. But, we have spoken with other states. We're aware of what's out there, just kind of getting a bearing of what our role could be in that, and how do we interact with, private funding that's already out there. There's a lot of questions on that, but we are, kind of getting into that. Yeah, we got the grant program out there, or will be out there soon. Great. That's kind of maybe a next, bigger focus for our group is what does that look like? And we're going to have a fall working group meeting. I guess it's not technically spring right now. So even though earlier this week, it might've seemed like it here for some parts of Massachusetts. So this, I guess technically this is our winter meeting. But we will be having one, I don't want to say like 6 months or so, but I would say sometime in the fall of 2025 to look forward to a point where, we'll have updates on the whole process of, assessing the master plan elements, which, if you're plugged in with other layers of DEP right now, we got the organic subcommittee coming up. We're having various other work groups who will be meeting to talk about, all right, where are we as far as our 2020 goals? Where are we now in 25? How are we proceeding toward 2030? So we'll be talking more about that, kind of what we found. Like I said, we're happy to continue these conversations with you, online, offline, in the cloud, wherever. But we'll definitely be talking about that come fall, and we would happily take any suggestions for things that you'd want to talk about, groups that you might want to hear from. We'll block out a couple hours sometime in the fall to just kind of reconvene here and hopefully have a worthwhile exchange. So that's really where we're going, like a high level look at where we're going here with this work group and with our action plan. And as always, my virtual door is open. Happy to talk with anybody via phone or email. If I don't have the answer, I might know somebody who does. So feel free. And thanks, again to Claudine and Joanne for their role in today's meeting, all the helpful information. Thank you to John for being able to jump in on some of the finer points. And thanks to the group for what you brought to the table today as well. In lieu of any other questions or comments at this point, again, I'll just take a beat here, but I think that's pretty much what we wanted to get across today. Okay, I don't see anything else popping up. Everybody have a great day, and we'll look forward to talking to you in the future. Thanks again.